FLM, wide open thinking, world-class work, and far-reaching results. Now with locations in Minneapolis, Columbus, Indianapolis, and Washington, D.C. A strategic marketing and communications company dedicated to serving clients who specialize in the business of agriculture and the life of rural communities.
Thank you for joining us for our latest Agri-Pulse Meet the Farmhands, joined today by Mike Tor from Tory Associates. Mike, thank you for taking the time to join us.
You bet. Thanks for having me.
Well, for starters, can you give us a little bit of an idea of the timeline of your career, the places you've been throughout Washington, going as far back as you'd like to go all the way up into the present?
Okay, sure. So I'm from Kansas originally. I grew up on a farm in Wamego, Kansas, which is in the northeast part of the state. I was active in 4-H, FFA, kind of did the normal thing that ag kids do growing up in a small community. I went to Kansas State University and majored in agricultural education, was a member of Alpha Gamma Rho during that time in ag fraternity, and my first job out of college was with the Kansas Grain and Feed Association and the then Kansas Fertilizer and Chemical Association. So I had a chance to be in about every little town throughout the state of Kansas during that time. And the Grain and Feed Association, at one point, they used to have a train. Santa Fe would bring in their VIP train, and that train would go from Hutchinson to Garden City, and the guys would play golf, and then it would go back. And it was on that trip, I was walking through the train, and there was one of the guests sitting there that happened to be a staffer for then Senator Nancy Landon Cassabon. And he wasn't visiting with anybody, he was kind of sitting there by himself, and I thought, well, I need to show some hospitality, and we started conversing, and it happened to be Alan Ott. And several months later, Alan Ott calls me out of the blue and says that he's going to leave Senator Cassabon's office and wanted to know if I had a interest in succeeding him. So that's how I came to D.C. And so I spent 6 years on the Hill, I guess, working for Senator Cassabon. Actually returned to Kansas because I swore I was not going to be a D.C. guy and was there for 6 months. And Senator Dole's office called, and at the time he was the majority leader. He was contemplating running for the presidency, and I thought, well, you can't pass this up. So I come back out, spent time with him, spent time with Senator Sheila Fromm, who was his successor for a period of time. And then when he lost, I went to the Commodity Futures Trading Commission for 2 years. And then I went to the International Dairy Foods Association, and I lobbied there for 4 years and was part of a major issue campaign during that time. And then went into the Bush administration for 2 years. I was the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Congressional Affairs and then the Deputy Chief of Staff. And I left after 2 years, having served for Secretary of Ag Ann Veneman and Secretary of Ag Mike Johans, and started this in 2005. And so we've been doing this ever since.
All right. So let's go all the way back to the beginning with that. You said you grew up on a farm in Kansas. And in talking with some folks, I think there's an interesting mix of people that do have ag backgrounds and people that don't, in terms of people that are working in ag policy in Washington. From your perspective, I mean, how do you think that balances out in terms of getting maybe a fresh perspective and some new eyes on the policy, or someone like you who grew up and can see the effects of this policy firsthand on the actual operation where you were working? How do you see that balance?
Well, I think you need both. I absolutely think you need both. I mean, I remember a period of time when I was at USDA, and we were working on country of origin labeling rules. And there were folks in the room when we were walking through, I kept saying cow-calf operation as part of our conversation. And finally, one of the folks kind of called a timeout, and they said, would you explain a cow-calf operation? So their background was very different than my background. To your point, they had not been on a farm, but so we were able to have that conversation, to be able to walk through the phases of production. But they were bringing something to the table, which I wasn't familiar with, was obviously international trade and law. So I think you need both to kind of provide the proper balance.
And in your varied career path, you spent some time on Capitol Hill, at CFTC, at USDA, as you mentioned. I'm interested to see, how is agriculture viewed differently in each of those different places? Because, I mean, obviously you would have been working in kind of the agricultural side of things there, but, I mean, agriculture means very different things to all three of those different entities. I mean, how is agriculture viewed at those different places?
Right. So, I guess I felt like back in the 90s when I was working on Capitol Hill, At times I felt like that maybe agriculture didn't get the respect that it deserved. There was a short period of time, Spencer, that I thought, is this the field that I want to be in? And can I just say how excited I am that I decided the answer to that was yes. And certainly now, you think about how exciting food and agriculture is with all that is happening. And at the CFTC, I mean, certainly that organization was started at USDA. But I was there during a time that it was obviously starting to evolve to include a lot of other types of financial products, so that it always had kind of that ag background, but it was becoming much more to the fact now that if you look at the makeup of commissioners at CFTC, there used to always be at least an ag person there. And they've struggled in recent years with appointments to make sure that someone is there with an ag background. So I think for some agencies they moved away from it, but certainly I think for others, ag will always be at the forefront. And clearly at USDA, it was always top of mind.
Right.
And I would just add, if I may, real quick, when we talk about food and ag, that's a pretty broad industry, right? I mean, there's several different segments of the supply chain: the input side, the production, merchandising, processing, manufacturing, distribution, retail, and finally the consumer. And even in that umbrella, it's very diverse as far as the industries it represents. So I guess I'm kind of giving you a broad question, but obviously there's a lot of different variations to that.
Right. What would you say was the job that had the most impact on the career you had now? I mean, was it the relationships you built at one place, or maybe the work you did at another? What would you say was the most impactful to what you're doing now?
They all contributed one way or the other. I think back that when we started in 2005, the one thing that I had that I didn't realize when we started this business was a network of folks, and it was a very broad network. It wasn't a network within just one silo. And that network really probably started in Senator Dole's office just through the fact that he was the majority leader and was running for president. So I had an opportunity then to meet a lot of folks from a lot of different parts of the supply chain. And then I would say second to that was USDA, because there every day when you're in the cage, every day there's a new problem, there's a new emergency. And so I really kind of developed those skills. And then I would throw in IDFA just because that was an opportunity to really look at issue management from a very broad perspective, not just going up to the Hill and doing lobbying, but certainly the communications aspect and the grassroots aspect and the state affairs aspect and how you kind of pull that all together for one cause.
Now you're a pretty unabashed Kansas native. You were in the purple tie today. I imagine a bit of a shout out to the Kansas State Wildcats. It was something that interests me within the grand scheme of agricultural policy in Washington. There's a bit of a Kansas mafia going on. I mean, you've got yourself from Kansas. You've got Dale Moore of the Farm Bureau. So many people from Kansas are now in pretty prominent positions in agricultural policy. I mean, what's behind that? Is that a Bob Dole contribution? Is that a Barry Flinchbaugh contribution? I mean, what's the contributing factor behind this, the Kansas power in D.C.?
Yeah, I mean, we've sat around and thought about that, and if you look beyond ag, there are a lot of Kansans here in town, and I think personally that probably was during the Dole era, when he was in various leadership positions and his counsel was sought about different appointments in government. He always looked to Kansas first, so that certainly brought out a lot of folks. And the issue now, I think, is how many young people are we bringing out from Kansas in this current environment? And I don't know if we have the migration from Kansas here for different positions that we used to do, because a lot of the names you mentioned are guys like me that are, in their 50s. So, and there's also just, I mean, anybody that's watching this that's from a state that's in this town, they've always got a passion for their home state. And, so we're able to get together and maintain that community, and it's good.
Let's shift away from your previous history and talk a little bit about Tory Associates. You guys have been in business for about a decade now. Can you just give us a 30,000-foot view of who you guys are, your clientele, your staff, things of that nature?
Sure. So, we started Spencer in 2005, and we've been blessed with a little bit of growth every year. We have a team of 6 people now. Our clientele, or when I talk about that broad range of food and ag, they represent most aspects of that. So everything from the Crop Insurance and Reinsurance Bureau, crop insurance companies and reinsurance companies, to the Southeast Lumber Manufacturers Association, to Dean Foods to Little Caesars Pizza. So we have kind of a broad spectrum of clients, and we do work for a number of trade associations. We also have clients that are non-lobby clients that we do more of the issue management, if you will, strategic planning for them. The firm itself, the primary focus in the beginning was on government affairs. Now, because lobbying's changing, it used to be that you just go to Capitol Hill and make your case. Well, now there's a lot of other voices that are going to Capitol Hill, not just through two-legged capital, but through social media and things they read in communications. And so our shop has, about 3 years ago, started to expand on the capacity so that when we're advocating on behalf of clients, we're kind of coming at it with a broader picture, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Now, earlier you mentioned that you were surprised how effective your range of contacts was. I can imagine that was helpful when you were first starting this out. But I also got to imagine it was not an easy task to start a government relations firm from square one.
Yeah.
I mean, what was that like, just kind of turning the key on your first office and getting going, so to speak?
Yeah. When we got married, Julie and I got married in March of 2005, and we started the business in April. Mm-hmm. And when we were going through the kind of the church-sponsored premarital counseling, the advice was you're kind of taking on a lot in 1 year. And we were like, oh, we can do this. And it worked, but there were obviously a lot of sleepless nights. A guy that's been around for a while lobbying, Macon Edwards here in town, I saw him at a reception one evening, and he said, "Do you lie awake every night pie-eyed?" And I said, "I'm sorry, what do you say?" He said, "Do you lie awake every night pie-eyed?" And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" He said, "Do you lie awake with your eyes open, worried if you're going to lose everything tomorrow?" And I was like, yes, I do. I worry all the time. So it was hard. But what it did is it pushed me outside of my comfort zone, which is what I was looking to do. I wanted just once to step off the cliff without a safety net, just to see what would happen. Mm-hmm. So in hindsight, it was really hard, and I'm glad I did it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Is that why, just kind of that risk-taking factor, is that why you decided to go at it on your own? Because I imagine someone with your resume could have commanded a decent position here in D.C.
Yeah, there were some opportunities as I was looking to either stay in the administration or possibly leave. And not to be too personal, but I turned 40, getting married, and I just felt like, I just once wanted to throw it all in and see what happens. Mm-hmm. And I felt like I was going to wake up at 65 or 70 or whatever and say I should have, and why didn't I? So I did it, because I thought, look, if this doesn't work, I left at the very beginning of the second term of the Bush administration, so I thought if it doesn't work, I can maybe jump back into the Bush administration or find something. Mm-hmm. But it worked. It worked. Yeah.
Here you are, about a decade plus, a little bit here into the Tory Associates realm. So we know what you've accomplished in your first decade. What's kind of your goals or your plans, so to speak, for the second decade and the decade after that?
Yeah. We actually spend time thinking about that. We've got a fantastic team. They're all younger than me, some a lot younger than I am. And I, for one, am very committed to everybody on the team continuing to grow. I'm excited about what's happening in food and ag, and I'm also a little bit scared. I mean, if you look at the technology and how fast it is developing and what that's going to mean, and if you look at the consumer attitudes towards food and what's happening in Silicon Valley and what that's going to mean. So as far as the issue itself, it's really a very neat time. It's not your traditional corn and soybean economy. It is, but it's kind of changing around the edges. And so when we're sitting here, we're trying to anticipate what are consumers going to be thinking and demanding, what are retailers going to be demanding, what's that infrastructure going to look like, and where are we going to be. And all I can say is every time I see a new technology come out in the lobby world or in the communications world, we spend time as a firm looking at it. Because what may seem like kind of an offhanded technology now, I'm realizing after all these years will someday be the thing. They won't all survive. But you think about organic foods, for example, and you think back to the late 80s, and everybody kind of thought it was a cause and a little bit nutty, and then you look how mainstream that is today. Mm-hmm. So we as a firm watch what's happening out there kind of on the edges that you don't hear a lot about and pay attention to that, because we think that's going to guide what we as a firm need to do to continue to grow and be developed.
And earlier you mentioned that you got married shortly before you founded the firm. What can you tell us about your family? Because I understand your family has kind of grown here since.
Yeah, we have a daughter.
Mm-hmm.
We have a daughter. I am, I would consider an active Republican, and she was a active Democrat working on Capitol Hill for Senator Fritz Hollings. So I've learned a thing or two about the similarities that Southern Democrats and Republicans have in common, and I've also learned some of the differences. So sometimes we have to explain to our 7-year-old that mommy and daddy are not fighting. We are simply arguing about policy. And our daughter is going to be blessed with having a very wide range of views on policy growing up in our household. Yeah.
When you're not on the clock, spending time with your family, what are some of your hobbies? What are some of the things that you enjoy doing?
Fewer hobbies now that we have a 7-year-old. So we travel, but and I also spend probably one of the things I enjoy the most is I think this is very important, to engage in new learning. So I probably spend, 2-3 weeks a year going to different conferences or seminars, trying to kind of expand my intellectual understanding of different issues. I enjoy the Farm Foundation, of which I'm involved with. And there's just some other things that we do on travel, but mostly it's family. And I enjoy this job. I enjoy the business. I don't see this as I spend time on this because I actually enjoy it. So on the weekend, if I'm working on the weekend, it's not as much because I have to, it's because I enjoy it. I'm liking it.
Now I'm going to do something I don't typically do in my interviews, and especially this interview series. I'm going to engage in a little bit of ambush journalism here.
Okay.
In doing some research on this, I stumbled across some photos of you in your FFA jacket back in your high school days. Did a little bit of internet sleuthing on my part, and I can certainly say that paid off.
Yeah, I was a lot skinnier back then.
Didn't have glasses, and
no.
A whole lot has changed.
But mullets were popular.
But I guess
and the part of the hair down the middle.
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah.
But that brings me to a broader point. A couple years ago, just to go into storytelling mode here, the National FFA organization has a big meeting of all their state presidents and vice presidents, and has a banquet for all the DC alumni. And I ended up sitting at the Tory Associates table one year, and was able to learn that you had delivered a fairly substantial sponsorship to Kansas FFA. Obviously, a reflection of the time you spent in that organization.
Yeah.
I mean, what was really the driving force behind that? I mean, I imagine had it have something to do with the benefits you felt you gained from your time in FFA.
When you're young, you're just kind of making your way, and you're active and you're engaged, and you're trying to find a job, and then you're trying to find a better job, and then you get to a point in your career and you kind of start thinking about how you got here, right? You start to reflect a little bit, and you sit there and you think about a lot of the sacrifices, and I'm sorry because I hadn't thought about this for a long time. You think about the sacrifices that people made to help you. I think about my FFA advisor. He spent a lot of time away from his family helping kids like me. I think about my 4-H advisor. He had a family to go home to. He would show up at 4-H meetings, with his farm clothes on, dirty, because that's what he had to do, and he would often try to get home to clean up, but and he had kids at home. And you think about the folks at K-State, folks that were committed to developing young people. So you think about that, and you just try to think of ways to give back. And that's why I did that. But giving back money, giving back your time, I think it's all really important to do, as you get older, to make that contribution. Absolutely, yeah.
And let's get a little bit lighter hearted here, because
thank you.
Somebody is a former. I won't divulge if it was a current or former employee of yours, but I've heard that you're a pretty good practical joker.
Yeah.
What's the favorite one that you've pulled, either in this office or in a different one?
I think practical jokes are fun because you get caught up in the grind of everything we're doing, and sometimes it's intense. So. I think humor adds a lot. So I love modern technology because modern technology allows you to do things with pictures. And so, we've got different cardboard cutouts that have been found, and we will put pictures on those cardboard cutouts for somebody when they return from being on the road, or if folks seem to be falling asleep, I always enjoy walking up quietly behind them. And I hate it when somebody does it to me. But it's just, I don't know. I don't know why I do it. I just like it. It's fun.
Just having a little fun at the office is all.
Yeah.
Now, I'll wrap up with this one. If you were to give a piece of advice to a younger version of Michael Torrey walking into his first day on the job, what would that advice be? I mean, what's the one thing you wish somebody had told you when you started your career that you didn't know, but now you do?
That I didn't know, and now I do. I grew up during a time where they would say work hard, play hard, and I took that very serious. And sometimes I wish I probably wouldn't have played as hard as I did. But I don't know that I would have changed things, I guess. Yeah. And, I'll tell you what, the piece of advice that people tried to give me that I didn't listen to, and I wish I would have, and it's this. It would have been to understand patience. I was always kind of had a disposition to hurry it up, and let's get it going, let's get to the end, and kind of being patient and enjoying the moment, enjoying the time. I think if I had it to do over again, I probably would have dwelled in that space just a little bit more. And there's a few people out there watching this that are saying, I told him! Yeah.
Mike, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I enjoyed it.